rose and left the auditorium. So as a young student sitting there, I knew I was in for something subversive and controversial. And that was the use of text in art, in visual art. So at that time, that was a controversial subject. Robert Indiana told a memorable story about his work that was, if you could picture it, eat, die. It was just the words eat, die. And he talked about how he had traveled across the country to his mother who was dying. I think he traveled by train. It took him days or at least many travails to get to his mother's bedside. When he got to his mother's bedside, she looked up at him and said, "Will you have something to eat?" And she died. And so you get this very, I never forgot that story. I think it's, for me, it's how the word turns into an image. And what would that be we're going to hear about today. So I just came back from a trip to, I was lucky enough to go to Norway. And I was thinking about this panel. And I happened on a show, a group show called Material Information. And this is from a work, these 3 slides I'm going to show you are from a work by Ola Vasiljeva. And she's from Amsterdam. And it was almost like this is almost work that's maybe the opposite of the theme that we're dealing with today. It's how an image almost becomes something. Maybe it's something, maybe it's not. So it's very, very difficult to name some of those objects. Sometimes you see they could be letters or objects that you can name, but sometimes they're pretty not very determined. So that reminded me of an incident that I had. I'm going to tell my eggs on a plane story. I went to the Detroit airport to get on a plane. I got lost going to the airport. I ended up in Ann Arbor instead, and then finally made my way back to Metro and was running down to catch my plane. I was late. I put on the plane. I sat down. They put it was 5 o'clock in the morning when I finally got on the plane. They put a platter of food in front of me, and I looked at it, and I was not going to eat it until I could name it. It turned out to be scrambled eggs. But that experience of having to name something that's pretty indiscriminate or inability to name made a big impression on me. I also worked with the Swedish botanist Karl Linnaeus in his work in naming. His project was to name all things. It was called the second Adam. And so the importance, the scientific importance of naming comes out in this subject as well. He was called the second Adam, and it is a very biblical idea, the idea that the word has power. The word brings things into being, and the idea of creation rests in the origin of the word. So we have word to image. How does the word become an image? Does it cease to be read in a linear way? Does it become an object? And then is it, as an object, is it then read? How is it read? Is it read like text, or is it read some other way? So we will cover, I'm sure, many more points when we deal with the 3 artists that we have today to talk about their work, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion afterwards. And I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one. Each will speak for about 15-20 minutes, and we will hold all discussion for after the panelists are done. So I first, there's one thing I'd like to announce, along with parallel to our panel today, we have a performance art piece by Slow News. And so you will experience Slow News doing her performance throughout and throughout our discussion. I'd first like to introduce our first panelist, Karl Jirgens. And Karl is a good friend of Artcite and the arts community. Karl is the author of 4 books, including 2 works of fiction published by Coach House Press and Mercury Press, and 2 scholarly studies published by ECW Press. His fiction and poetry appears in Canadian journals, and his theater performance works have been presented nationally and internationally, including the Ultimatum Fest in Montreal and at the Interfestival in Quebec City. Karl has edited Rampike. I think he has brought us a hot off the press issue to pass out today. It's an international literary journal of contemporary art and writing, and it's been published since 1979. Karl has a novel in progress also titled Cold War Cruise.
Thank you.
So, this one.
Get started. As we're loading this, I'd just like to thank Christine and Bernie for hosting this event here at Artcite. It's always wonderful to be here. And it's not on the first page. Go to the top. And also thanks to Susan Gould for organizing the event. How do you move this up, Bernie? No, that's not good. Oh, there we go. It's at the bottom of the file instead of the top. Zap it up. Okay. Are you able to move it up? Okay, I'll just get started because I know that's it. Thanks. That's perfect. Oh, even better. Okay, great. I'd like to also remember and thank Raymond Souster, who was a neighbor of mine when I lived in Toronto. Ray passed away at the age of 91. He was a people's poet working in the Imagist tradition, and he was the founder of the groundbreaking Contact Press, as well as a small press publisher, coordinator of public readings, featuring authors such as Louis Dudek, Irving Layton, George Bowering, Frank Davy, Al Purdy, James Rainey, Leonard Cohen, Margaret Atwood, Michael Ondaatje, Anne Hebert, and Charles Olson. So he introduced all those people to the Canadian literary community. What a guy. He's always a bit modest and somewhat shy. Perhaps that's one reason he isn't known better, but he was a tremendously important impresario and spent a lot of time making connections for so many emerging authors during this time. In fact, Atwood's first Governor General Award-winning novel, The Circle Game, was published in a small edition out of his basement, out of his pocket. So that tells you a little bit about the way that works. Hey, Bernie, are there going to be more cheers for the people?
Yes, we're good.
Oh, great. Okay. So I'll get started, and I just want to say that I'm going to be talking about the word, but I'm not going deep into conceptual art, into the extreme edges of it right now, because I think I'm talking to an audience that maybe hasn't caught up to that yet. So I'm just going to give you more of a genealogy of the kind of things that will be coming up later today. So I'll begin with a quote from B.P. Nicol, who was a colleague and a pal of mine in my Toronto days. And he talks about the word. To go beyond the word, exercise control over it? No, no, no. Beyond the word. Not to merely control it, but to overcome it. Go beyond the point where it's even necessary to think in terms of it. And that excerpt is the frontispiece to Nicol's Gifts, the Martyrology, Book 7, and. Marshall McLuhan's maxim, the medium is the message, is eminently suitable to visual poetics. The applications of the alphabet can be seen with reference to a sliding scale. At one end of this scale is the utilitarian function that uses alphabetical communications to forward thoughts and ideas for business, day-to-day practical applications, typically without much attention to language as an artistic medium, except when it comes to advertising, which is highly creative. Moving along the scale around the mid-level, we have novelists, and a substantial number of poets who do give consideration of language and the alphabet as a medium unto itself. But at the far end of the spectrum is an appreciation of the alphabet as an expressive medium without regard to questions of representation. That means it's not trying to paint a picture, it's not trying to represent a person or a personality or tell a story. It's just working with the medium of letter forms. And instead gives attention to those letter forms themselves as visual constructions. So if we consider the artist at the far end of the scale, then we can see a focus on the alphabet and the medium of language itself as it is either reshaped or manipulated to create conceptual artistic statements, visual poetics, textually based sculpture, language-based audio art, intermedia performance, and digital expression. You see examples of it around the room here today. And so there's a rather diffuse purpose to this artistic and often non-representational application of the alphabet as compared to the day-to-day usage that we have. Crossovers of signs that form early types of communication that have been with us from the earliest days of human expression. Cave drawings, petroglyphs, rock paintings, Egyptian hieroglyphs, illuminated medieval manuscripts all incorporate some form of semiotic or sign with visual imagery that documents an emerging textuality. The Greeks adopted the Phoenician, Semitic, consonantal alphabet, and the syllabary of the Cypriots. Early Arabic, Semitic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin alphabets provided phonetic sound systems that often borrowed from predecessors or each other. The Roman cursive A originated with the North Semitic consonant aleph or ox. Aleph provided a vowel sound to languages that used ajad. And, whoops, goes fast. So this is supposed to be a red ink, it's bluey. I don't know if you can read this, can you see that? Yeah, okay. An ajad is a language system that has no vowels. Okay. And if you can read the blue text on the screen, you may wonder about the importance of vowels. If you can read this, then you know vowels are redundant. Now, if you believe that vowels are not essential, then this puts a whole new spin on Christian Book's innovative book, Eunoia, which uses only one vowel of the English alphabet for each of the chapters of the book. So there are chapters dedicated to A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. I'll give you a short example. Here's a brief example from the I chapter of Book's book, Eunoia. And I'll read a bit. Lightning blinks, striking things in the midst with blinding light. Whirlwinds whirl, driftwinds drift. Spindrift is spinning and thrilling whirligigs. Which blind spirit is whining in this whistling din, etc. So this may seem to be a rather non-utilitarian application of language, derived as it is from the Oulipo school of constrained writing. But in fact, it serves a good purpose, because lately we've learned that there are several shortages of vowels in the now prorogued and resolutely silent Ontario legislature. After today's panel, we'll be taking donations of vowels. I've assembled a number here. And we will place them in an unmarked manila envelope, ship them to the Ontario legislature as a gesture of Windsor's goodwill. We'll attach a polite note addressed to the former premier or to the financial officer. Recently, I'll read you a quote from the letter, whoops, from the letter here that we're going to send. I don't know if we can see that here. Okay. Dear Ontario Liberal Party Finance Minister, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, save the vowels. Recently, the Ontario Liberal government has chosen to prorogue the legislature. These are controversial terms, and we imagine that you're simply at a loss for words when facing criticism arising from the opposition parties. So toward ending the prorogue, we citizens have gathered some vowels to help you out. These vowels can be combined with any common consonant to make all the words you will need to address your various detractors. We're aware of current budgetary constraints, so consider this a donation on the House. Please think of this as a gentle prodding aimed at starting a vowel movement which will reconvene our Ontario legislature and restore it to its previous dizzying heights of rhetorical magniloquence. Sincerely, your concerned Ontario constituents. Rejecting representational confines of alphabetical letter forms, one can trace artists starting from the ancient Greeks. I don't know if you're familiar with Theocrates, 600 BC, George Herbert of the Renaissance, 1600s, Dadaists and their contemporaries in the 20th century, as well as the Fluxus, Oulipo, conceptual artists of the 20th and 21st centuries. So we can recall Hugo Ball, Kurt Schwitters, Gertrude Stein, Raymond Queneau, Yoko Ono, yes, Yoko Ono, Dick Higgins, Saul Lewitt, all extending the limits of language as art form to go beyond the word, focusing on language itself as a medium. And in accord with the opening quote from B.P. Nichol. In addition, language and recorded graphemes have also been used for spiritual purposes. So, for example, among the North American indigenous peoples, the sacred birch bark scrolls of the southern Ojibwe Bide-Wewen serve as pictorial visual narratives recording tribal memories, sometimes dream events, sacred rituals, or out-of-body experiences. Put on Kurt Schwitters here. The methods used in the creative and non-representational or pre-linguistic application of letter forms, as opposed to the utilitarian applications, are founded on rather different principles. In Desire in Language, Julie Kristeva speaks of the prelinguistic function of language with reference to sounds that have yet to be given any agreed upon signifying function. That means they have no specific meaning. In addition, the two modes of communication, utilitarian and representational on the one hand, as opposed to artistic and non-representational, engage significantly different neurophysiological responses. The utilitarian aspect requires a fundamentally right lobe or logical reaction, whereas the creative applications respond better to left lobe or intuitive lateral thinking reactions. So this short excerpt from Kurt Schritter's Sonata can serve as an example, and I'll try to read this for you. Fums bo wa ta za u bogif gui e dilri bo fums bo ri bo fums bo wo bo fums bo wa ta bo fums bo wa ta za fums bo ta za u. So acoustic, visual non-representational uses of alphabet and language developed exponentially in the 20th century, and they appear in mail art and are often presented as shape poetry, lettrism, fluxus, concrete poetry, performance art, installation art, and other innovative forms. And with the advent of audio recording technology, sound poetry has flourished, as was demonstrated, by the way, last week at the Common Ground Art Gallery here in Windsor, which featured J.W. Curry providing a medley of sound poetics over a 2-hour concerto. It was quite fun. Non-representational language-based artists work in 2- and 3-dimensional formats using simple pen and ink, carbon paper, mimeograph, letter set, xerography, typography, typewriter, photographic repro, as well as digitally inspired, computer-based compositional methods and internet applications. I'll show you a few pictures of these later. Mimeographs and then photocopying inspired the first big step in revolutionizing such forms, and the international mail art circuit provided a forum. Mail art, by the way, is free and open to anybody who wishes to engage in the postal system, and the internet provides a second major inspiration towards the expression of non-representational language or alphabet-based artistic expression. So I'll provide a few short examples of non-representational or pre-linguistic language art. And the first is a short language piece I composed almost entirely of filler words. You guys know what filler words are? People know what filler words are? It's words that don't mean anything, like by the way, or incidentally, okay? All right, so I just composed a piece for that to give you an idea of how we can go beyond signifying function and still have an artistic statement. And it's okay to laugh because it's intended to be absurd, stupid, and funny. So go ahead. This piece is called What I'm Trying to Say. So, well, if, then, yes. And so basically what I'm trying to say is, well, if one might, at this time, it's like, quite literally, I think, really, but apparently what I'm saying actually is, I guess, and what I'm telling you now, you know, this is, it's basically, well, you know what I mean? But actually, I wouldn't say that because, well, you know, and, oh, it's really so just, excuse me, but this, sorry, wouldn't you say? You get it? Like, wow, right? So likewise, see where I'm coming from? I mean, really, huh? One would think blah, blah, right? But it's more because it's above and beyond that. It's like clueless, utterly. You dig? I mean, yeah, baby, wherever, eh? Like you think? Or putting it another way, no jive. If you get what I'm driving at, just get down. If you're reading me, putting it this way, if you catch my drift, I'm telling you. On the other hand, it might be that with no reference or just putting it this way, I'd be saying it. Oh yeah, word. So like you could, or one might, whenever, you know, but then I'm just saying, like, whatever. See what's involved? It's so way, no guff. It's like that. And then again, once more, you could say, oh, for sure. I mean, bitchin', you know, totally tubular and just so gnarly, dig? Like, oh my god, cowabunga. See what I mean? Like, duh, too much, to the max. And there we were, and you were like, whoa. And I was like, whoa. And we were all like, whoa. And then, oh wow, it was stoked. You know what I mean? Blown away, totally. Non-representation. You get it?
Girl talk.
Okay, it's starting to make sense. Okay, so I'll show you some images and then I'll close, and that's it. My piece is almost done. This first piece is by Clement Padin. He's out of Uruguay. And he uses letter forms as a shorthand or abstract to convey a political message. Reed Altimus, who is on the cover of the current Rampike, and I have 3 copies for you here today, so you can grab them before you go. Uses alphabet forms shaped into visual art pieces, as does Andrew Topel, who does the back cover of this particular issue. He's working out of Florida with Altimus, and the two of them provide the covers. Nico Vasilakis is also a U.S. artist, and he's just finished editing International Visual Poetics Anthology, about to be released, and you can check that out online. Just put VIZPO or VIZPO and check it for online. And you'll find an entire book of this stuff. It's also on internet. Derek Boyot, out of Canada, uses the same approach. He likes to use the antiquated letter-set method. If anybody knows where to get some letter-set, please tell me. It's beautiful stuff. It's a plastic sheet with letter forms on the back. You burnish it on the paper with a little burnisher, and you can leave the imprinted letter on the paper. Hard to find. He's still working with this system. Brilliant, making beautiful pieces of art with it. Judith Coppathorne, contemporary of Derek's, working also out of the west coast of Canada, uses letter shapes, sometimes enhancing them with pen and ink, and sometimes with computer assist into quite complex letter-based image sets. Gus Moran, Windsor artist, as you I'm sure know. He's the curator at the Common Ground Art Gallery, recently completed a set of typewriter poems, some of them have been published in Rampike, and he works with printing press and hand press technologies. Gus and I are both included in the VIZPO anthology I just mentioned, coordinated by Altimus Vasilakis and Donato Mancini, who's next. He does these sort of very sophisticated arrangements combining with text. Donato Mancini will be coming to Windsor later this month, and his latest book is from Book Thug, and it's ironically titled "You Must Work Harder to Write Poetry of Excellence." And it deals with the weak critical reception of innovative poetics by reviewers in the country. And Louis Cabri is coordinating a panel on that for Tuesday, October 30th at the Rose Room in the Vanier Hall, University of Windsor. That's Tuesday, October 30th, Vanier Hall, U Windsor, 5:30 to 7:30, admission free. The panel will include Kate Hargreaves, Louis Cabri, Donato Mancini, and myself. Karl Stetzer, one of my favorites, likes to include other images along with text in this piece from her Mappamundi series, which collages map images, found images, and text images, baby image as well. On the other end of the sort of visual scale, we have Carla Bertola, working out of Italy. She works with textures, strips of paper, text that has been torn off of sheets of paper or sliced, handwritten text. You can see a little bit of handwriting squiggling on this line here, to generate effects that loosely fall in the tradition of what we might call minimalist art. Bertola is one of the editors of the Italian journal Offerta Speziale, which features visual poetics. William Mark Sutherland takes a different approach in this piece titled Onomatologos, where he confuses right lobe brain function by deliberately, and left lobe, by deliberately running text together. The couple of lines at the top read, linear rhizome epic-centered radiating germinal linguo-autonomic cryptogram mythicized dubitation humanist. It hurts my brain to read that piece until I switch into right lobe associational pattern function, which usually happens after a beer or two. Then it becomes easier. Paul Dutton, working out of Toronto, former member of the Four Horsemen group. How many of you have heard of the Four Horsemen? Okay, well, that's it. They were probably the most celebrated sound poetry group in Canada. Steve McCaffrey, Beefy Nickel, Rafael Barreto Rivera, and Paul Dutton were all part of that group. It was an a cappella group that used sound as the fundamental of their coordinated efforts. He slices pieces into diagonal strips, extending the cut-up techniques of Tristan Tzara and Brian Geisen, who also partly inspired William Burroughs. Michael Winkler, I love this guy, arranges the alphabet into circles, and then, I don't know if you can see, but he spells words, here's the circle of the alphabet, by drawing lines from each letter to the other letter. Here's an easy one, A, N, D. So it makes a V shape. I love this one, shapes down here. It actually comes out as a star. So you can actually read this as an alternate form of language. Christian Burgot, working out of France, Uses a cut-up method as well, but here he goes into infinite regression in a kind of fractalized patterning that goes into smaller and smaller images. Susanna Reisman, as shown here at the gallery, and she moves into a conceptual art statement. What she did was take long strips of paper that had text written on them, roll them into tubes, and then she pushes up the center of the tube into a kind of rounded pyramid shape, moving into a 3D sculptural format. Sculpture also enters into Fernando Aguiar's work. He's out of Portugal, and he does intermediate performance, live word presentations, and so on. These are just sort of to introduce you to some of these. My own work, I use typography, including electronic typography. Here I've combined the words of Apollinaire, je bois cette eau brûlante comme ma vie que je bois comme une eau de vie, which loosely translated is, I drink this burning water of my life which I drink as the water of life. The line connecting the two columns in the H is pantare udem mene, which in Latin means everything flows, nothing abides. And I've tried to arrange the typography into wave patterns here so as to suggest the liquid flow. The next piece, almost done, only 3 more. Whoops. This is a piece dedicated to Bill Bissett, and here I'm manipulating the typography, going into a kind of a cascade format, and the fluidity here comes out of Bill Bissett's somewhat humorous comment, which was, maybe we should come before we go. So this one's called a particular coming and going. The next piece is dedicated to B.P. Nickel. His favorite letter was the H, which is a palindrome. It's a perfect palindrome because you can read it equally well left and right or upside down. And this is all composed of the letters BP. You'll notice that there's a kind of a moire pattern here. That's deliberate. There's another moire here. And the joke at the bottom is, having left out space, no H's were harmed in the production of this poem. Cute, eh? Such a wise guy. Okay, and this one's showing a little more sophistication. Here I'm working with cells, computer cells, and generating a kind of vortex of textuality. I'm trying to suggest a kind of magnetic energy that's coming through this. So this is a combination of photography and xerography, as well as computer assist. And the last piece is titled Seesaw, which is a deliberate pun. And it works with optical illusion, one of my favorite images, the Necker cube. You can see it turning left or right, depending on how you look at it. So seesaw is both right side up, upside down, and it seems to be coming or going at the same time. So the idea of multi-stable perception is part of that piece. So that's about it. Take some rampikes before you go. Grab some vowels. We'll put them in the envelope. It's a performance art piece. You can participate. Thank you very much.
In the fall of 2011, he participated in Big Drawings at the Martha Washington University Art Gallery. Other venues have shown Jones' work, include many galleries in New York, Grand Rapids, Oakland University, Robert Kidd Gallery in Detroit, the Lieberman Gallery in Chicago, and the Thames Gallery in Chatham, Ontario. So the Henderdine Art Gallery on the campus of the University of Saskatchewan, and the definitely Superior Gallery is under the day. So I'd like to introduce Dennis. He's also had shows at Woodstock and a lot of shows in Canada. Dennis is a good friend of the Windsor art community. He's been at several shows in this area in Canada, and I'm glad he's with us today.
I'm going to come out here and join you. Kind of like to break down some barriers every now and then. Sometimes I'm terrified of my heart, with its constant hunger for whatever it is it wants. The way it stops and starts. From the Telltale Heart writer Alan Poe. Sometimes it's so nice to see you. And your comfort is everything to me. But sometimes I don't care if you're uncomfortable. Because sometimes you're too lazy to read this. And sometimes you could be more attentive. And sometimes you could try listening. After all, sometimes I might say something that you've never thought of before. Or sometimes I'm so sure there's a real story here. And sometimes it can be enlightening. And I don't want you to miss a word, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just talking to myself. Although I don't really mind, because sometimes I like to hear myself talk. And sometimes I can't help that I'm such a fascinating subject. Please remember that. Sometimes it's all to please you. Although sometimes it's full of contradictions. And then sometimes you might have some questions. And of course, sometimes I have all the right answers. So please consider that it's a serious business to give to you everything you ever wanted, so that you will let me inside you. And I can almost hear you say, fill me up. But then again, sometimes I imagine what you're thinking. And sometimes I wonder about my choice of words. Although, sometimes I lose myself in all this. And then, sometimes I tell lies. Or sometimes I pretend. And sometimes I'm wishful. And SOMETIMES, sometimes I really don't care. But still, sometimes I'm very productive, and I'm sure that sometimes you will think this is all true. But really, sometimes you shouldn't believe a single word. And then, sometimes you may wonder why I do this. Well, it's like this. Sometimes you've got to be a machine. Or the major fuck-up that enjoys everything turning to shit. Sometimes it's the shit disturber's gift, you see. Sometimes it's about all this shit that gets in the way. And also, sometimes I think all those positive people fuck everything up for the rest of us. I found that sometimes it's necessary to dig through shit to discover something worth saving. So believe this. Sometimes you might think that I'll run out of words and simply go away. But honey, you better believe I'm just starting out. And sometimes it's very clear to me that you haven't a fucking clue about any of this mess. And sometimes there's so much to tell you about that I don't know where to begin. As you can see, I've accumulated quite a list. And then I thought, sometimes I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I found that sometimes I've said too little and I'm trying to make up for it. And then sometimes it takes over. You may have noticed that sometimes I'll say anything that pops into my head. And also that I'll write them down. Sometimes I get carried away. And then sometimes you might feel compelled to say something. And I know that sometimes I should let you have your say. And sometimes I'll let you say anything you like. Over 1,000 times. Add your own statement to any drawing using the function provided. I think that sometimes it's like music to my ears. Or maybe it's that sometimes I worry about the things I haven't said. Or I'm quite sure it's because sometimes I talk to myself all day long. Or it could be that it's the sound of delight. And sometimes I could listen to this for hours and hours. And then maybe sometimes it's like poetry. But sometimes I think I should write a book. And I have the perfect spot for you to read them all. Sometimes I wonder about it. Here are 51 of them. Sometimes I wonder what you'd say if I let you speak. Then I wonder if sometimes you ever think about how obsessive this is. And then I think sometimes I'll bet I can entice you with something sweet and lure you in. Sometimes a flame of rose. I know it will be the best ever. It will include something about paradise and love and definitely lust. And then again, sometimes it's seductive. And sometimes I care about your feelings. But I think it's best to open yourself to all of it. So here goes. Will you be my muse, my mistress, my lover and wanton desire, my lustful queen to fuck across the distance of sea and sky, or rut and heat as animals in the deep forest? I want to smell with you the wet peat earth covered heating and longing to feel winter ice against your breast, rub red, and sip new spring yellow-green dew and pressing heat of summer on your thighs. Will you be my love in these times that fade quickly as hot breath on the cool lake where we bathe? Now as then, can we stop time? Can we reach across forever? Can we count stars in a night sky until we forget time? Or lay down and feel our beating hearts as we drift to sleep before one more night? But I might add, honey, don't be shy, give it to me like you need it. And also, you wrecked me so good this time, I'm still shaking. Or you might like this one. Your words haunt me, and tempt me. They set my imagination in lust wandering, to howl in moonless darkness and velvet recesses of white dusk set, adorned with leaves of river grass and wild flowers. A molting horn sheds old skin, hanging moss-like swollen and beaten red, a new prong above raw, dug into black furrowed bark of thick dead trees. Whisper sink me your words, calling to your side. Lay me to wreck, do with me as you will. I've come to know that sometimes great things can happen. And there's a lot to think about, such as Sometimes, somewhere, someday, somehow, some way, somewhat, something, someone, someplace, somebody. And sometimes our desire is a bridge. Sometimes our desire is overwhelming. Sometimes our desire is everything. Sometimes our desire consumes us. Sometimes I wonder about desire. Sometimes our desire eludes us. Sometimes we are driven by our desires. Sometimes our desire controls us. Sometimes our desires inspire us. Sometimes we can be frightened by desire. Sometimes our desires change us. Sometimes our desires may corrupt us. Sometimes we may desire too much. Sometimes we are confused by our desires. Sometimes our desire can destroy us. Sometimes we desire something else. Sometimes we need to consider our desires. Sometimes we only care about our own desires. And two, sometimes we may satiate our desires. Or perhaps 70 words. Like slide, suck, want, hold. And slip, remove, bake, brush, purse, grasp, pump, blow, ease, release, sweat, grip, knead, bind, flick, grip, caress, succumb, press, bite, shiver, yearn, pinch, chew, squeeze, insert, pet, kiss, knead, stroke, lust, hold, excite, love, raise, grab, twist, spread, stretch, constrict, breathe, sway, long, taste, pound, open, flex, shove, rest, pant, restrain, gasp, fall, arch, thrust, moan, fondle, slap, buck, swallow. Or this. Set to sea in a nameless paper boat and without a care, said he. I know not how far to go or if she's even worthy. I'll drift sometimes this way and that, whichever way the wind shall blow. Whichever way the wind shall take me. To follow moonbeams from star to star above or a glowing sunset on a outlying horizon. Not my head shall guide this, my love, but to my heart I will give submission. I sing this song for my oars, the waves being out of time. Or if I chance to cross some distant shores, I dare to greet the sublime. And there's also this. And so he developed a love for emptiness, all the spaces between things. What demarks this from that? Interstitial transitions of season, faraway lands, or seconds on a wristwatch. It didn't matter if it were raindrops that echo off distant canyon walls or tracing rock fissures and narrow passages. Joints of brick or cracks in a concrete walk. Driving asphalt pavement and the intermittent sound of tires over repair patches. A pause in conversation for a shared breath. The opening shape of a mouth as a sound exits. He became fascinated by the gaps of words and letters. Large and small, quiet places waiting to be filled. Wherever he could insert himself and feel his arms outstretched, a hand or fingertip grip, a fingernail edge or foothold. He was fixated on the distance between, the silent talk of each and everything that somehow remained separate, which seemed to matter so much more than the objects themselves, attention of which there was infinitely so much more. I know that sometimes it will echo in your head, but sometimes you might want to say thanks for telling me about this stuff. Because sometimes it might be what you hope for. And sometimes it will make you feel more. And sometimes it will say something remarkable to you. Or sometimes you may discover something beautiful. Just like this. Then again, sometimes I can imagine the best is yet to come. So one last thought before I go. It is the color of awareness and infinitely knowing sadness. It is the weight of all life and the burden of gravity that holds us to the ground. It is the cry of and earth itself, as we so desperately want to fly. It is what prevails after all else is considered. Well, just one more. Our eyes emit the brilliant light of suns that we hold inside, illuminating our way in darkness. Lift your eyes to the heavens and wonder. Lock up your spirits a little more. As a faint glow reflects back from somewhere unknown but familiar. It's true that sometimes I wonder about all these things. So I hope you believe me when I say, sometimes it's everything. Because I do have an indescribable love. And sometimes I think we could talk all night long about it. But unfortunately, sometimes I think this is the end. It's time to close the book. So, good night, sleep tight.
Amin Rehman is our next speaker. I met Amin when he was in the University of Windsor's MFA program, and came to our program as a mature artist with a career. And he subjected himself to our MFA program, and we were all enriched by him. I had the fortune of working with Amin as a teaching assistant, meaning class and drawing class. So I'm happy to introduce Amin Rehman to you today. This is Amin's show, by the way. Amin Rehman is a multidisciplinary artist who has been working since the 1980s. Originally from Pakistan, Rehman has studied at the National College of Arts in Lahore, at the University of Punjab in Lahore, and the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom, and of course at the University of Windsor, Ontario, most recently. He has exhibited extensively in a number of exhibitions and festivals across Canada and abroad, notably the Doris McCarthy Gallery in Toronto, the National Gallery in Pakistan, Rush Arts Gallery in New York, and University of Technology in Sydney. Rehman's interests and issues are primarily drawn from his experience of living in Pakistan and in Canada. His work engages and comments on the current effects of neocolonialism globalization, and also encompasses a number of artist practices such as installation, painting, video, and beyond work. Rehman currently resides in Toronto, and I give you
a very briefly, I will look into the factors which have influenced my text-based work, and then I'll take a couple of pieces and discuss. First is Indus Valley Civilization. The collection of Indus Valley Civilization has formed mud painting and terracotta collections have always inspired me as a student, which refers to the short strings of symbols associated with the civilization. The Indus Valley was a Bronze Age civilization, was located in the northwestern region of the Indian subcontinent. Mughal miniature. As a child, I had seen my father painting every day in the studio. He was a master miniature painter in Indian style of painting. miniature painting started as court painting in the 16th century, when after exile, Emperor Humayun brought Abdul Samad and Mir Ali, two miniature master painters from Iran, who took the Indian painting to next level. In Mughal miniature painting, the daily lives of emperors was depicted. Albums of Babur, Akbar, and Jahangir emperors were the masterpieces of that time. The royal court set up artist studios and patronized master painters in their interns. Similarly, on provincial levels, governors also established miniature painting workshops. There emerged numerous schools of provincial painting from 16th to 19th century, such as Kangra, Gujarat, Rajasthan. Since Perso-Arabic script were also a part of those albums, and emperors recognized the development of calligraphic art in miniature. About this work, that is for the textual passages of recent series look into the geopolitical situation of Afghanistan and Pakistan border region through the lens of neocolonialism and aggressive globalization. In the largest text, you will see the two absorbing layers of text: contrast, complement, contradict, and superimpose. By investigating the use of neo-colonial language, Perso-Arabic scripts intertwined with Islamic calligraphy with English. The appropriated textual passages serve as a pictorial content while using the palimpsest and play with the cultural meaning embedded in the layered typography. Primarily, the work comes in two sizes. The larger format is motivated by architectural inlay panels and friezes of architecture, Islamic architecture, and hanging carpets. The Talib Kufi square font in English intertwined with Kufi creates a third font. At first, it looks like the text is in Arabic, then the Englishness of the word makes the viewer comfortable and removes the perception of the Arabic text as language of terror. Whereas the small encaustic pieces, encaustic tiles trace colonial history, the effects of war, global dominance, and cultural interference. These direct and open text selections replace historical text and are symbol of the cultural invasion experienced in colonized countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan border region. I'll take the small tile, which is Global Empire. It comments on the history of corporate culture since the arrival of British East India Company in 1599. The text, based on book again as old as Empire, in which Stephen yet says the corporate culture has created word first global empire, which refers to the increasing American role and influence in the world. Political globalization is a fancy word for the imperialism. The new order emerging since the Berlin Wall came down in 1989 turned full circle to a new age of empire. The empire has brought misery and poverty for millions of people around the world by sabotaging the principle of self-determination, justice, and freedom. Ironically, these are principles which US has continuously worked for, made clear by the efforts for an open door advocating the independence and self-determination for underdeveloped countries in Atlantic Charter Declaration in 1941. And the central piece, this is again text one installation. We just see more of the same, is a visual confrontation, showing that history continues in the present. It shows that it has a British presence, how British colonialism was handed over to Americans, and they have continued the same imperial policies. The front piece, you have the watches, we have the time, is based on Ron Morris article from newspaper. Reporter asked mountainous Paktia province 48 years old Mujahid Rehman if the Taliban should strike a deal with the Americans and the Kabul government. No, he shouts, the fight will continue until the Americans are defeated. He insists no matter how long it takes and what the sacrifices. He recalls a prison guard at Bagram who was preparing to return home to America. The soldier gave Rehman a bottle of juice as a farewell gift and asked how long the Afghan expected to remain behind bars and what he hoped to do afterward. Quote, time in jail and time in jihad means nothing to us. Unquote. Rehman claims to have told the American, your watch's battery will run down and its hand will stop, but our time in the struggle will never end. We will win. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. You've seen some brilliant and varied examples of our problematic word to image, and I see a fantastic audience here involved and excited, and maybe we'd like to open up our discussion with questions or questions to the panelists or comments or some observations of your own. So I'll open it up to our audience.
Hey.
I came in just as you were into your Robert Indiana story the other day, and I was wondering when that was, and you mentioned that people walked out. So what you explained was controversial at the time, because it seems so controversial now, but what was the controversy all about at that time? As I said,
Well, these were modernist painters and artists, and they believed in the meaning of art in form, paint, shape, not extra meaning. And of course, they would have that whole idea of art would have a lot of problems with text used as art, because you read this. So what does it have to do with the formal understanding of art? So they were adamant, and that was the modernist view, and they were definitely exemplifying it.
I think they also, just to add something, I think they also found it too easy. You know, these people that were accomplished painters spent all the time working with paint, that words were just something easy that was commonplace too. I think that was a big aspect of their, you know, keeping it at arm's length kind of reaction. I disagree with that, obviously. But I think even still today, it carries on. There's still levels of that still lingering around today. I guess even within, as an artist, as a painter myself, I mean, there are people that react to that work, my work, that same way. That it's something too easy, it's just words. So it's not visual. Well, that seems absolutely ridiculous to say that words aren't visual. I mean, they are. They conjure all kinds of imagery in your mind as you read them. And I think that's a very important aspect. but at least that.
You didn't have.
No, I have shown even back home. There is more problem. I still have to show more places.
It's interesting how these formalists are intended to challenge their audience. They intended their audience to have to invest a certain amount of work and imagination to appreciate what they were doing, and they weren't interested in an easy effect on their audience. And of course, then pop-up and a lot of other things came, and now we're left where a lot of contemporary art is more or less entertaining. It may have a high degree of craft involved, maybe it's a jump tools or something. All in all, it's not meant to really challenge you or require you to invest a lot of time and imagination to appreciate it. And I think in that historic progression, the use of words fits in there. And I think, at some point in time, you maybe look at these unreader, effective artists as being too esoteric, leaving the greater population behind. But now that we've moved away from that, we're left with art that is maybe not challenging enough, not requiring enough from the audience to really be satisfied. So, that word, the use of word and text was part of that historic progression, and maybe we were happy for a time to get away from this formalist, challenging sort of work. But now that we've gone down this road, have we reached a point that we're not happy with either?
You're always going to be unhappy with art because that's all that the avant-garde ever did. It was always challenging the borderline of what was considered socially acceptable as an aesthetic statement. And you can go back to the Salon des Muse in France, and you can look at how Van Gogh was rejected, how Cézanne was rejected, and then we look back at those as the masterpieces, right? And the same thing can be said about Plymouth Greenberg group. They were devalued. So what? It's just that they've done that experiment. The experiment that they did in paint has now manifested itself in language. So I've shown one sliver of linguistic expression that defeats representation. They're not trying to say something with words. They're using the words themselves. The way that, say, Jackson Pollock was using paint itself. Jackson Pollock wasn't talking about making landscapes or people's faces on canvas. He was talking about hot and cold colors, contrasts of light and dark, things like that. It's a whole different type of discourse. It's there. It does challenge the audience, but you've got to recognize it. We've got to learn that new language, right, in order to understand and appreciate the sophistication of those statements. Jackson Pollock's paintings actually portray fractal patterns because of the manner in which he was putting down the paint. And not everybody's going to recognize that immediately, but they're there. And so it's a whole different type of reading that's involved. And many audiences haven't learned how to read that way yet. And so the sliver of language art that I've shown today is only one thin layer. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying it's one thin layer. And my own writing is fiction. I write fiction with words that make sentences, But I'm also saying we need to learn to appreciate the artists that have gone beyond that and are moving now into what we can call conceptual art statements. And those do demand a certain respect. I think they are challenging audiences. They are tricky. And they are not immediately apparent. You really got to look at them. And the conceptual art movement, I think, is quite helpful. And certainly, I think, in third year. So, you see guys like Saul Lewitt's influence coming out into the press. So, I see some of that in your
Yeah, I just, it's kind of a two-parter. I apologize, I came in late, so I don't know if this is addressed. One, I think we forget that calligraphy was a form of art. I don't know if this was addressed, but if we're looking at a full circle, I think especially with your work, there's a point where calligraphy was art, and art, and it was definitely an art form into itself. until electronic press became so dominant. And we see that now coming back again, where people are hiring people to do calligraphy work. And it's now kind of almost coming full circle to a space where they don't even teach script writing in grade schools anymore. They only teach typing. So I found also, and to connect that to, and I'm sorry, Dennis's work, is as someone who's very kind of obsessed with fonts and typography, what made you, how did you decide in your piece how to choose each font to represent your artistic expression?
They're all the same. All the fonts are pretty much the same throughout my work. And I don't want to be a typographer.
No, I understand that, but I would think that sometimes the typography you choose to express yourself in an artistic piece would also help emulate that expression.
It could, it could, and I don't want that to necessarily be. I mean, typography has a rich history, understanding of all that, and I don't want that to be the focus of the work. I want the words to be the focus of the work. And that's why.
When you have the or, the statements,
yes.
in between, they would be in one font.
Sure.
Sometimes it would be definitely, you can see the hand in the font, and sometimes really messed up. So there are differences that have expressive meaning.
There are differences in terms of, I guess maybe my handling of the work, the process that it's going through as it's being completed. There's those types of differences, but it's not necessarily intended. It has an expressive quality. I agree with that, but beyond that, that's really all it is. It's about the process that it's going through. That's all.
Because I see the typography in the font as just as like an additional brushstroke to something. It helps increase the expression itself.
Sure.
So that's how I was interpreting it.
Lately I've been getting away from just this more of a standardized font that I've been using in the past. And it does, I agree, it has a very strong expressive quality. And it's almost like there's certain emotions that are being communicated with that. And I may be going in that direction, and perhaps there's a transition occurring with my work right now that I haven't really figured out. So I'm still working it through.
Thank you.
Yeah, in my work, I knew the tradition. I was trained as a calligraphist.
Yes.
And I knew the Islamic calligraphy, khatati, but I never used in my painting. And in this case, it comes as a strategy.
Exactly.
And so that conceptually I use. All these years I knew, but I never used because that was not working. I was trained as a figurative painter and done 21st years of my professional life as a figurative artist. In the last 10 years, as it changes. So this is just how I'm communicating my message. So that's what it's a difference.
Thank you.
Also, I think there was a little confusion in discussing Dennis's work because I think at least I was discussing your performance work, time-based work, and I think you were referring to your actual work.
I think so. And I think, there's several pieces that I wrote that span probably over the past, 7 years or so that were displayed in that presentation. And the bulk of the work were these small 11 by 14 inch drawings that were shown over at the art gallery a few years ago. And the way those were done, those were all done with the template. They're charcoal with a single template, and I wanted them to be very immediate. They were all, the way I worked those was, whatever thought came to my mind, I would write it down. I found that as I was in a studio, I'd be working on something, and all these other thoughts would just start entering my head. So I thought, well, I can step back from that and let that perhaps be the focus of the work. The immediacy of it, the momentary, right in the moment, okay? And to bring in typography, and it just seemed like way too much baggage. I wanted to be very straightforward, restrained because of perhaps the more emotive content of the words that I chose to
Your stuff's also sculptural, man.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
all that wood and the paint and the hand painting, and it's rough, and it's not really concerned with the typography, so
Yeah.
that's a whole dialogue.
I agree completely. The material is extremely important. How that installation of 1,000 drawings affected that space that you.
Or the bridge.
Or the bridge.
It's broken, it's a broken bridge. Right. I'm gonna ask Amin about what you mean by blue black. that comes up there. It's a pretty interesting.
Blue black has a different connotation in terms of this situation. Every strategy has given a setback, like the strategy of the government, that goes towards all the terrorizing, controlling power, but that's the case of Taliban situation.
There's always a reaction. The piece, the sculptural piece in the corner, it says blow back on one side, and what does it say on the other? So what is it? And so one's in black and one's in
The words in black. So that's all up to
That's a nice dialogue.
yeah. So this I've been using Paris as a strategy. And similarly the top layer is optimistic and the back layer, background layer is pessimistic.
Makes sense.
I know, Amin, I can't see around the corner, so I don't know, the piece you had at the art gallery with, his name Davis?
Raymond Davis.
Raymond Davis. So this was shortly within 6 months after the incident involving Raymond Davis in Pakistan.
Right.
And so, you know, people, that name was not familiar to a lot of people at that time who hadn't been keeping up daily with the news. You know, but you put a name up like that, and it's really interesting because, you know, a name is a name, and you know, so what attaches to that name makes people ask, what is Raymond Davis? You know? So these things, each of these things struck me as a point of departure for discussion. And this is an intention, is it? Certainly, would you say to do that?
Yeah, that was making his iconic value. He was, I guess, a contractor working on behalf of CIA in Pakistan, and he killed 2 guys on the roadside. So that was the idea behind, you know, working against black people.
And another thing, it was a couple months ago, and I think it was a Tiger game, and I saw an airplane, you know, they pull these ads, you know, flying, you know, airplanes fly these ads by. And one said, shame on, and another name. Shame on and another name. Again, a name many people were not familiar with, you know. But it would make people ask, now what the hell is that name? What is that? And so, but it was flying over the, you know, the river, over the stadium and everything, you know. But it was a person who had, you know, a soldier who had massacred 17 civilians in Afghanistan. But that was somebody had put the money together to hire that airplane to say shame on and that name. And so this is those things, the effect of a word and the placement and the context. You know, it's really a powerful thing to do that.
I missed that.
It was on an airplane.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, I mean, I wanted to follow up on AJ's question. AJ, sorry. In terms, you were mentioning earlier that your work has had more controversy in Karachi than it has in Canada. If I heard you correctly, you thought a few moments ago. Is that what you said? I don't know if I misheard you. You said that the work has stirred more controversy
situation with all the countries showing, if I show Lahore is more like a desert town, I think that is acceptable. Compared to Islamabad, which is more, which close to the border region, so that's right. You are 100 miles away from Ahmedabad, where Osama was captured or killed. So things, it's very sensitive. It's very challenging to show in Pakistan because the country is burning for the last 40 years. It's not easy to show sensitive issues because you don't know which bullet is coming towards you. And in Canada, we know it's always tough to show this type of work, text especially. And but you can show, and there is a feedback. You can grow as an artist. So that's what and probably I have good response in terms of showing my work in Canada or Western.
So would you say it was the content that would be controversial, or the form? That is such a contemporary art?
Some is the content, and it's not for the art lovers or art community. It is more for the street people who are not aware. So you really relate to it.
I find it interesting that we're really all talking about the same thing, because to borrow a word from Dennis's presentation, it's about desire. You can talk about desire from an individual basis, or you can talk about desire from a political viewpoint, or you can talk about desire from an aesthetic perception. And so art has a desire to reach to an audience in a way that it's never reached before. This is always the challenge with art. You're always on the edge. You're always looking for a new way. There are limits. And there are limits to human capability and how you can reach out to another person. There are limits to changing people's perspectives from a political vantage point. And so we're all talking about the same thing and the limitations of the word. Because the word cannot do everything. You can just point to something. Desire, by definition, is that which you cannot have. That's what it is. If you've got it, it's satisfaction. It's what you cannot have. And we're all pointing to something that's missing, but it's not there yet. We don't have world peace, we don't have world love, and we don't have aesthetic satisfaction yet. We're still striving. So this is, I think, the core of the direction. So thanks to Susan for flowing.
Well, in a way that goes back to what AG was saying, that these outputs are provocative because they're not closed. They're not aesthetically closed, like the formalists would aesthetically close and balance their productions. Whenever you have text, you left it wide open to it's not a closed thing. And especially when you interchange, you're suggesting a lack of closure because you've got the back and forth between the two texts.
And also, second part, the following decision. But the second part of my series is about Pakistan, and that is where we have illegitimate government actually issues, American government at this point. So I'll be showing my my work next month, which is crisis state. So that will be much more challenging to show. So it will be interesting. There's a whole new body of work.
I'd like to thank the panelists very much for their great presentations. Karl, Jirgens, and Dennis, Michael Jones, and Rehman. And I'd like to especially thank Artcite and BookFest for collaborating on this panel so we can have this discussion about image and word. So thank you very much for coming.
There are magazines here, feel free to come on.
encourage with us this summer. He invites everybody, and also the Windsor Celtic Michigan group featuring some alumni from Artcite, staff at the School of Visual Arts, noise border ensemble. I believe they'll be performing later this evening at Landon Tower.
In the basement.
In the basement of Landon Tower.
And ask us for more. If some of you are from out of town and would like entertainment tonight, this would be great.
Thank you very much. Yes, you push yeah, push against it.
Yeah, it's actually just a block. You know, it's across from the It's across from, yeah, it's Rogues Gallery Comics.
breaking those for bringing forward and kind of breaking linearity and also abstract.
No, I think this is really, definitely pushing into this area. But you almost need that piece to it. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's
if I have money from which I'm promise.
I mean, do you remember that guy's name, that other guy, the second guy I was talking about there? The guy who's there, who was an a soldier. Somebody had taken the trouble to say shame on
Can I tell you something about the atmosphere? When there was no one here but me and Bernie. And now it's here. Because the space has changed. There's a whole but not over good. Because what I'm seeing is different than what I thought, and they get and I think
Conceptually, this part is about Karl, this is about states. This is about styles. Memo gave us a situation where Pakistan if you choose the top, so we will do whatever. So that is a big, then Pakistan is and this is so much, it's a very important. me too, but I saw the highlights. Yeah, that Obama was.
A little difficult to explain foreign policies. They're so similar in so many respects that there wasn't much kind of difference as opposed to some of the
Pakistan press wrote today, after that debate, Obama is more dangerous than Obama is more dangerous.
the only potential for interesting happened when the moderator asked, hypothetically speaking, if Israel called you and said the bombers are on the way to Iraq. And Romney kind of like said, well, Israel would never do that to us. So he kind of like avoided the question. That's the word.
I'll leave the last hour now. Here you go.
And he could not. And then James said he hadn't done it. And I wrote him an email and asked if we can collaborate. He wrote him and said that he school. So since then I'm speaking with him all. First, I have to be clear what collaboration I mean, what we can do.
Well, do you have an idea of you'd like to see that way, and then if he's then fine.
Because presently, I went to him thinking of writing the text and I learned on this and how I can bring his different text. It's not from saying a different text and speeches and stuff. So then
Maybe the collaboration is how you, like a discussion with him about good text that you're specifically interested in making work from. I mean, it can be on any level, but yeah, something you have to do.
Don't let me just stand in front of me.
It's interesting to constantly when they work together, this is
Oh, Jesus.
Have you been in?
no, not like on the 10th January, we have spoken
And I love this project. Absolutely. Plus I like the fact that most weights on it's great for these kind of events. It's actually a walking stick I bought on email and I made it.
So your thing is next.
Well,
see.